Welcome to tonight's event, Funding Your Education, Understanding Financial Aid and Scholarships. This is the third event in our First Generation Student Success Series that we've been organizing together. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Alsop. I'm an assistant professor of communication and media here at SPS, and my co-organizer next to me, I'll advance the slide so we can actually go to our bio page here. Oh, sorry, Carla, I'll let you preview our events.
Sure. So each semester, starting last semester, we had 2 events. This semester, we'll be having 2 events also, and going forward, we'll have at least 2 every semester. So this spring, tonight, you're at Funding Your Education, Understanding Financial Aid and Scholarships. And then in April, we're also having an event titled Imposter Syndrome, What It Is and How to Overcome It. And that'll be at the end of April, and more information will be coming out to you, but please feel free to, ask us questions about that at the end if you have any. Specifically, what is imposter syndrome? We're happy to answer that.
So I can do a little bit of housekeeping tonight before we do our real introductions. So in terms of asking questions, you can use the Q&A feature or chat to submit a question. We will have a Q&A portion designated at the end of the discussion tonight. That's an anonymous form. The Q&A feature is an anonymous form you can use to submit questions without attribution. You could also try raising your hand during the Q&A, and we'll see if we can unmute you. We're not sure yet. And if you have any technical issues, you can use the chat to let our team know, and they'll try to address them. Well, as I said, I already introduced myself. I am Dr. Elizabeth Alsop, Assistant Professor and Director of Communication and Media.
My name is Dr. Carla Marquez Lewis. I am the Director and Distinguished Lecturer for the Psychology program.
And these are the other speakers who will be joining us tonight. I wonder if they might just quickly unmute and introduce themselves so you can see. You're going to hear more from them in a moment. So Leah, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. My name is Leah Hayeski. I am the Director of Bursar and Scholarships here at CUNY SPS. I am very excited to be here with you. And like some of you here, I am too a first generation student, so very excited to share some of the information out. And now I will pass it over to Teresa.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Ortiz, and I am the Associate Director of Scholarships. I am thrilled to be here with you all this evening, and I truly look forward to the discussions that we will be having regarding funding your education.
Great. And last but not least, Nancy.
Hi, my name is Nancy West. I started working for SPS about 2 years ago, but prior to that, I worked for many years in financial aid, and I was a director at Baruch, financial aid director at Baruch, and I am also first generation. So
that's wonderful. Well, we're going to, as I said, we're going to hear more from our 3 panelists tonight. But before we do, Dr. Marquez Lewis and I just wanted to quickly say something about why we chose this topic. I think one reason was that it really kind of grew organically out of our first 2 events. We got a lot of questions from students that pertain to financial aid, scholarships, funding their education. So we thought it really deserved its own sort of designated event on the subject. But we also thought that, the question of financial literacy and particularly awareness around student debt is really important for everyone, not just first generation students, but certainly including them.
And for first generation students in particular, not having access to family members who have previously gone to college, it becomes very tricky how to navigate where do you find funding. And so students often find themselves in really difficult predicaments where they have taken out too many student loans or they haven't taken advantage of grants or scholarships that are available. And so that was really the impetus for this event, is to really try and arm people with information and resources so that they can access the money that they need to pay for their education. So when we were looking at some of the data around this, it was really, surprising and shocking. $1.7 trillion currently are outstanding in student loans, and about 45 million people pay loans every single month. That's a lot of people who are paying student loans, myself included. I finished grad school quite a long time ago and still pay student loans. So this has become what people have, been talking about, and just an epidemic of people who have lots and lots of student debt. It ranges, of course, depending on where someone went to school, but the average debt upon graduation for undergraduates, those who attended a private university, it's about $32,000. Those who attended public universities, it's about $26,000. And remember, this is for undergrad education. So when you go to graduate education, where there are very limited resources for funding, you see the numbers, jump quite a bit higher. So for graduate school, it's about $70,000. So you figure if you've gone to undergrad and grad school, you can leave sometimes owing, 6-digit figures in student loans. And we're seeing that more and more. So particularly for medical school and law school, that number of 70,000 is just going to be left in the dust. It's far more expensive. It's 6 figures alone just for those. So for undergraduate education, Pell Grants are often available, and many of you may know about Pell Grants, and those will come up later in the presentation. But for a 4-year public education back in 1975, a Pell Grant would cover about 79% of your costs, so tuition, room, and board. And that money has not stayed steady with the needs of students. So in 2017, if you look at a comparison, that Pell Grant only covers about 29% of the cost of tuition and room and board. So what we end up seeing is even money like grants that doesn't need to be paid back is not stretching as far, and it's putting students in a really difficult predicament of trying to figure out how to pay for an education that is really required in this day and age to get ahead and to be successful. So we're hoping tonight you'll be able to get some resources and ask questions that you need to get you in a much better financial position.
Yeah, and on that note, actually, I will stop sharing my slides and let our team take over. They're going to share a presentation on the topics we just discussed, and then we will have plenty of time for Q&A. So I'll turn it over to you, Leah.
Thank you so much. Hold on one second. Just want to make sure. Can one of my panelists confirm they can see the first slide? Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. So again, thank you so much, Carla and Elizabeth, for this opportunity. One of the things we definitely understand is that when considering attending school, affordability is a factor that's taken into consideration. You are here, so you are ready to invest in yourself, and you understand that. And our goal is to make sure that we do whatever we can to ensure that college is affordable and we remove as many financial barriers to education as we can. A bit of an overview of the things that we will be discussing tonight. Nancy will take us through an overview of financial aid in terms of the application process and the type of financial aid that is available to you. We do want to make you aware of things of academic progress. That's how your academics can affect your eligibility for financial aid. After that, Teresa will take us into an overview about scholarships and some tips and advice regarding the application process. We'll then go through some tuition benefits that students that are either active military or veterans may not be aware of. And then we'll go through another tuition benefit that some folks may not be aware of, employee-sponsored tuition coverage. And then we'll wrap up with some tips and advice and go into our Q&A session. So with that, I will pass it over to Nancy.
Okay. The first step in applying for federal financial aid is, of course, the FAFSA. And you can just Google, how can I submit the FAFSA? It's also on the slide. When completing the FAFSA, make sure that you put in the federal code for SPS, because we get emails from students saying, but I did the application, but we don't have it, because until you put in the code, that's what gives the federal processor permission to send us your very personal information. And it's what's needed to process your aid. So The FAFSA will, there's a series of questions on the FAFSA, which will determine whether you have to file as a dependent student or an independent student, and it'll guide you through whether you are required to put in parental information or you're not required. If you have trouble completing your FAFSA, there is a phone number that you can call this FAFSA customer service, and I'll give you that number just in case it's not on the slide, but it's 1-800-433-3243. I think most students are able to log on and just complete it, but if you have trouble, the feds will help you with that. For New York State residents, after you've completed the FAFSA data, there's a link that you can continue on with after you've completed all the FAFSA information. It'll say for New York State residents. That's how you apply for New York State aid. And if by any chance you miss that link when you complete the FAFSA, don't be concerned. Once your FAFSA is processed, if you haven't applied for TAP and we see that you're a resident, New York State Higher Education Services Corporation will send you an email inviting you to apply. I have spoken to some students that didn't get that email, but if you know you did your FAFSA and you think you missed the link, once your FAFSA is processed, you can log on to the state website. And again, you can complete the application if you've missed it when you did the FAFSA. The information on the FAFSA will provide a number that we use to determine what financial aid you're eligible for. It takes income, assets, number in household, whether you're dependent or independent. It takes a lot of factors into consideration. But once the federal processor massages all of that information, they come up with what was currently called expected family contribution. They're going to change the name to student aid index because family contribution is very confusing to students who it's only them and they think, well, my family's not contributing, but really it's, in that case, it's based only on your information. That information, as long as you've put the information, the code on, you will, and you're not picked for verification. I'll talk about verification. The college will calculate how much federal aid you're eligible for, with the exception of student loans. Student loans, there are colleges that package loans up front. SPS does not. In fact, most of CUNY does not. There are a few CUNY colleges that will. But if you decide you want, you're not getting enough aid to cover your costs, you can submit a student loan application. And at SPS, that form is available on the website. You would Google either undergraduate student loan application or graduate student loan application. It's going to take you to a page that will give you the loan application and instructions on how you submit it. It's a pretty common error that students believe that they can submit their loan application online. At SPS, they cannot. They have to draw it down, print it, and email it into the financial aid office. And all of that is in the instructions that are available online in the financial aid section of the website. Pell Grant, there's a range of the amount of money you can receive, and it's based on your student aid index, which is calculated by the information on the FAFSA, plus your enrollment status. And just an example, if you were eligible for a maximum Pell Grant of $2,000 for full-time enrollment, if you're only going 6 credits, that would be cut to half of that amount, to $500. If you're going 3/4, you'd get 3/4 of the award. So, or I'm sorry, to $1,000. If your grant was $2,000 for halftime, you'd get just $1,000. It's based on both your student aid index and your enrollment status. For supplemental educational grant, college is given, CUNY is given a certain amount of money to give out, and it goes to the lowest income students first on a first come, first served basis. With Pell, if all of our students were eligible, we could keep requesting the money and keep making awards. With federal supplemental grant, it's a limited pool of money. And so the earlier you get your application in, you're better better your chances are of getting SEOG grant. And those grants tend to be small, probably around $200, because again, we have a lot of students who have financial need and there's a limited pool of money. But that's something, if you get in early enough and you have enough need, you may be also given a supplemental grant. Student loans, the difference between subsidized student loan and unsubsidized student loan. For a subsidized student loan, you have to demonstrate financial need. And it will take into account, what the cost of attendance plus any other aid that you're getting. And if you have remaining need after that, they can give you an unsubsidized loan. For a student who has a higher income and doesn't qualify for any grant aid or subsidized loan, they still have the option of applying for an unsubsidized loan. And the difference being a subsidized loan, the interest is not accruing while you're in college and only begins to accrue 6 months after you either graduate or drop to less than half-time status. On a subsidized loan, unfortunately, the interest begins to accrue as soon as it's dispersed. So it's, of course, if you submit a loan application, we are always going to try for subsidized loan first because that's beneficial to the student. The interest is not accruing. But for students who don't demonstrate financial need, by the federal formula, we know reality may be different, but they still have the option of applying for an unsubsidized loan. And with student loans, we always recommend that you borrow, you really think about the amount that you're borrowing, because as they've mentioned, those debts can rack up pretty quickly. And if you're unsure, think about it for a while before you request when you decide how much to borrow, because if you can get away with a little less, try to do that. Try not to have as much debt, especially if you plan to go to graduate school. Because for graduate school, the only option for federal aid is unsubsidized student loans. So if you decide when you complete your undergraduate degree, if you decide you want to if you think you're even thinking about going to graduate school, try to keep your debt down, because it will be only unsubsidized loans, unless, of course, you can get a scholarship. But that's a whole different issue. I'm talking about federal aid. And unfortunately, there is no New York State TAP for graduate students either. So most of our students who are in graduate programs, they will take student loans, unsubsidized student loans. Okay, New York State aid. Tuition assistance program. I mentioned before how you can apply for that. I think the code for applying for that was in the prior slides. It's 1420 for SPS. And to qualify for that, you must be enrolled for a minimum of 12 credits. If you're taking fewer than 12 credits, you cannot qualify, regardless of what your income is. The next program, Aid for Part-Time Study, that is for students who would have qualified for TAP, but are only attending on a part-time basis. But again, just like with SEOG, the college is given a limited amount of money to divide among students. So even though you may have qualified for TAP, when they give out the aid for part-time study, they're going to be giving it to the neediest students first. And then once the money is gone, that's it. There is no more to award. So with TAP, just like Pell, if all of our students were full-time and qualified, we could keep processing the awards and the state will keep paying. With aid for part-time study, it's a limited pool of money. Okay, Excelsior Scholarship is also for New York State. It's got very specific requirements. I mean, you can Google that, but you have to have not been out of college for too long, and it's very specific on what they're looking for. You have to go not taking a break from college. There's a lot of other requirements. DREAM Act Scholarship, that's for undocumented students. Although undocumented students do not qualify for any federal aid, they cannot get Pell or SEOG or student loans. New York State, if they file the FAFSA, they may qualify for DREAM Scholarship, which is pretty much, very much like TAP. And you can, if you're undocumented, you can apply for that. You'd have to file the FAFSA. We know you won't get the FAFSA. However, to get to the TEP application, you file the FAFSA, and then they can proceed on with the Dream Scholarship. Above 8, yeah, that's for only, it's true, only for undergraduates. All those programs are only for undergraduates. Okay. Private student loans. Okay. Oh, the other thing I should have mentioned with Pell, although the awards are scaled, it is the only federal program that a student can receive an award if they are registered for less than 6 credits. It's not a huge amount of money, but they will award a Pell Award for less than 6 credits. And again, it will be based on your index and your enrollment status. Private loans, we only recommend that if you do not qualify for federal loans, and but you can apply for them if you are less than half-time. Most of them require a cosigner or good credit, and they do frequently have a little higher interest rates. On that one, the other benefit that's not on here is for a federal loan, you can't submit a loan application after the period of enrollment is over. For example, I spoke to a student last week. She was taking 6 credits in the fall, but with only 3 credits in the spring. She did not submit her loan application on time, so she cannot apply for a federal loan for the fall, and she can't do a loan for the spring because she's only 3 credits. She waited until during the spring to ask about loans, and at that point, since the fall semester was over, we could no longer process a loan for her. She was a student that, you know, we told her about alternative loans, and she can apply for a period that was that is past. So I don't think they'll do it for years past, but you know, for a semester, you know, in this case, she could have applied for a private loan for the fall, even though we couldn't do a federal loan for that time. Okay. Yeah, okay, that's just okay, satisfactory academic progress. There are, both federal and state have requirements, but they're not the same. And we're not required to check them with the same frequency. For federal aid, after the spring semester, we're required to check to see if a student has met the GPA requirement and the credit completion requirement. And the GPA, for undergraduate students, they have to maintain a GPA of a 2.0 and complete a certain percentage of their credits. For graduate, and that is only checked once a year after the spring grades are in. For TAP, for New York State aid, it's checked after every semester. And if a student received a TAP award but did not complete the required number of credits, that will make them ineligible for the very next semester. Say if a student was required to complete 12 credits in the fall, only completed 9 or 6, they lose their spring TAP award. And they don't get New York State aid again until they've made up the credits that the state paid for in the fall that they did not complete. So a student who did not complete enough credits in the spring, the way they can reinstate their eligibility for TAP for the fall is to take the credits they didn't complete in the fall. Say if they completed 9 in the spring, they can take 3 credits in the summer, earn those credits. They will add them back in to what they didn't complete in the spring, and then that will reinstate their eligibility for the fall. Oh, you do have it on here. Federal aid is once, okay. For graduate students, of course, they have to maintain a 3.0 GPA instead of a 2.0 GPA. In addition to that, the completion rate is higher for graduate students. Graduate students must complete at least 2/3 of the credits they have attempted. If they don't, they're not making satisfactory academic progress. There is an appeal process And the way a student appeals is they write to the financial aid, send an email to the financial aid office, title of the email, SAP appeal, SAP appeal. And for both, this you can do this for, I believe there's also a form on the website for TAP appeal. But they have to explain the circumstances that prevented them from meeting the SAP standard. It could be, someone was sick in the family. We saw so many of them during the pandemic, so many appeals as a result of the pandemic. But it explained whatever happened, things happen to people, it's understandable. And it goes before committee. And if the committee approves the appeal, their aid is reinstated for a semester, and usually with conditions. Frequently, it's that they take only X number of credits for the next semester and complete everything they've attempted at that point with a grade of, for undergraduate, 2 or better, or for graduate students, a 3 or better. If they meet those requirements, the conditions of the appeal, they have the opportunity to appeal again and keep getting aid. If they don't meet those conditions, they're just not eligible until they get back on track with meeting the standard. Again, and for New York State aid, there is only one lifetime. If the student can submit multiple appeals, federal appeals, but only one for New York State higher ed for TAP. And that includes any appeal they submitted at any other college. If a student submits an appeal, we have to check to see if that student was already granted an appeal for another college. And if that's the case, we cannot process it.
Nancy, from the Q&A, we have a question that I think would be great at this part. The question is, what percentage of credits need to be completed to maintain aid?
Are you talking about for graduate or undergraduate?
They didn't specify. Oh, undergraduate.
Okay, there's a chart. If you Google, it depends on how many they've attempted. It's sort of a sliding kind of thing. And if you Google on the SPS website, Google CUNY SPS satisfactory academic progress, and you're going to see how, if you've attempted this many, this is how many you had to complete. It's more of a sliding scale than with graduate. Graduate, it's a straight up 2/3 have to be completed. But for undergraduates, it's going to have other. It's not just a set standard like that, but it is on the website.
Great, thank you. I popped that link in the chat. And then we have, before we move on to the scholarship section, 2 other questions. The first one is, can you explain what are the types of loans and what do they mean? For example, Perkins versus direct loans.
Perkins is a thing of the past. There are no more Perkins loans. I think you're asking about subsidized or unsubsidized. Is that correct?
They didn't specify, but I think it would be great if you could review that one more time.
Sure, of course. For a subsidized loan, a student has to demonstrate financial need. And again, that will go back to the information that was reported on the FAFSA. And that will determine if a student has need or not. An unsubsidized loan, it really doesn't matter if the student can have a very high income, not demonstrate need, and still get an unsubsidized loan. The difference being the unsubsidized loan, and the reason they don't care if you get an unsubsidized loan if your income is higher, is that the interest begins to accrue immediately as soon as the loan is dispersed. And normally loans are dispersed in 2 payments, regardless of what the period of the loan is. So if you do a fall spring loan, and that's what we recommend if you're going to be in for both semesters, submit it fall spring at the same time. As soon as that full disbursement pays out, the interest begins to accrue on an unsubsidized loan. On a subsidized loan, the interest does not accrue until a student has either dropped below, it begins to accrue 6 months after a student either drops below half-time status, 6 credits, or graduates from college. And at that time, the interest begins to accrue. So basically, while you're in school on a subsidized loan, as long as you're taking 6 credits, you're not being assessed any interest on that loan. Subsidized and unsubsidized, it begins to accrue immediately.
I see here Dr. Marquez Lewis. You have your hand raised?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I think one of the areas that students find really confusing, and rightly so, is the issue of compounded interest. Would you be able to just mention sort of what that is and why it's important that students keep that in mind?
Sure. On an unsubsidized loan, the federal processor will give you the option of paying the interest while you're in school or having it added on to the principal of your loan. If it's possible to pay the interest while you're in school, all the better, because if you have it added on, your loan is growing, and then that means you're paying interest on the interest. So that's sort of compounded interest. If you have the interest that's accruing added on to the principal balance that you borrowed, that loan is growing. So if it's a possibility to pay that interest while you're in school, that's the best way to do it.
Okay, and then we have one more question from the Q&A that I think would be good here. Is there, can you elaborate on any aid that's available to out-of-state students?
Oh, absolutely. Although out-of-state students do not qualify for New York State aid, they're eligible for all federal programs. It's the federal programs are across the country, as long as they meet the citizenship or green card. You know, there's certain criteria. As long as they meet those requirements and the income requirements, it doesn't matter where they're living. It's a federal program that's across the entire country. So they're eligible for Pell, SEOG, student subsidized loan, unsubsidized loan.
Thank you so much.
They're eligible for anything that's from federal government.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Keep your questions coming in the Q&A. We'll definitely come back to Nancy for more questions to answer those questions. But for now, we are going to pass it off to Teresa to speak a little bit more about scholarships.
Thank you, Leah. So next, like Leah mentioned, we will be discussing scholarships, specifically scholarships offered to students by CUNY SPS. So the CUNY SPS Foundation offers various scholarship opportunities per academic year. The eligibility of each scholarship is different, but the details can be found on our webpage. Our annual scholarship opens in late March or early April for fall awards. Once the application opens, we send an announcement out to students via their CUNY SPS email address. And we also send out routine reminders throughout the application period through vessels such as email, text, and now social media up until the application deadline. If you're interested in learning more about scholarships, we truly encourage you to visit the CUNY SPS Office of Scholarships webpage, and we'll be sure to drop the webpage link in the chat. The Office of Scholarship also manages CUNY SPS's short-term assistance programs. The programs include the SPS Emergency Grant, the Food Access Initiative, and the CUNY SPS Textbook Grant. For the SPS Emergency Grant, this provides emergency financial assistance to eligible students who are experiencing financial hardship that can impact their educational success. In order to be considered, students must be enrolled in the current semester, submit an application, and include supporting documentation to outline their hardship. Some examples include assistance with rent if you had a loss of income, or assistance with an unexpected medical expense due to an emergency injury or unexpected injury. The emergency grant is offered for each semester throughout the academic year, so long as there's funding available. For the Food Access Initiative program, this provides supports to eligible students experiencing food insecurity. Students are eligible to request microgrants every 30 days as long as they're enrolled in the current semester and provide proof of purchase of groceries from the previous grant. Any initial grants are dispersed as an e-grocery card to Fresh Direct, and subsequent requests are dispersed through CUNY First through either direct deposit or mail-in to what the student has on file. The maximum award for each request is $50. And similar to the emergency grant, the Food Access Initiative program is offered for each semester throughout the academic year, so long as there is funding available. And lastly, the CUNY SPS textbook grant supports students with textbook costs. If awarded, students will receive a book voucher up to $200 for use at the school's bookstore, Academos. Undergraduate students cannot apply if you are receiving the Pell Book Advance, and to be eligible, students must be enrolled in a degree or certificate program and not be enrolled in a course that has a zero cost textbook. The textbook grant is only offered in the fall or spring semesters.
Hi, Teresa. Before we continue, Dr. Marquez Lewis posted a great question. How competitive are the short-term assistant programs? And does CUNY SPS often have funds left over, or are the funds scarce?
So that's a great question. For the short-term assistance programs, that is something that we are working hard to continue funding on. We've never had an academic year where we don't have funding available. We are very communicative to our donors and our development office when we feel like we're running low on funds, because we want to make sure that we can get funding for the students. Sometimes what may happen is that we have to adjust the maximum award. Let's say for the emergency grant, sometimes it might change from 12, right now it's at 1,250. We might have to change that to 1,000 just to ensure that we still have funding available for students, because we know that emergencies do occur. For the competitiveness side of it, especially with the pandemic and the ongoing needs of our students, we generally approve of the majority of the applications. However, please keep in mind there's no guarantee, but we work with the students to ensure that they submit all of the documentation that's required. And even if a student is denied, that does not mean that you cannot reapply. That just means that maybe we need to touch base and see specifically what other documentation we can ask you to submit, and then we can always bring it to our review committee again. So please do not hesitate to apply for the short-term assistance grant, any grants, because you think you may not get it. Our office is very, supportive, and we're here to help you. Please reach out to the Office of Scholarships if you feel you have an emergency, and we'll definitely work through with you through a phone call or an email to ensure that we can get your application to as ready as possible for the review committee. Next, we will briefly touch on external scholarships. It is important for us to note, though, that CUNY SPS cannot promote or endorse external scholarships. That should not discourage you as students from researching scholarships on your own. Just a few quick tips to consider when you're searching for opportunities. Please be sure to research and then research some more before applying for scholarships. Researching will definitely help to protect you from potential scholarship scams. Remember that in general, you should not need to pay for any scholarship opportunities. If you do come across that situation, again, go back to tip number 1, please be sure to do your research. And lastly, please be sure to thoroughly read through the requirements of the scholarship before applying. You want to make sure you completely understand the scholarship requirements and any post-award requirements as well. There are also many reputable websites available to you to research external scholarship opportunities. We'll be sure to include the website links in the chat, but some of them include FastWeb, College Board, and even the cuny.edu webpage. As I previously mentioned, our CUNY SPS annual scholarship opens yearly in late March or early April. With the application opening soon, we wanted to highlight some tips for the upcoming application cycle. Remember to make note of the scholarship deadlines, which can be found on our scholarships webpage once the application opens. So when you visit the Office of Scholarships, there is a link that says important deadlines, and it'll take you directly to when our deadlines are for the applications. Be sure to answer each question. There are various eligibility questions throughout the application. Additionally, within the personal statement and the financial needs statement, that's within the application, and it has different components to the questions prompted. Something else that we would like to highlight is that you do not need to complete the application in one sitting. You could definitely save your application and take breaks when needed, so long as the application is submitted by the deadline. We also strongly recommend that you compose your essays outside of the application in Word or Google Docs. Very similar to an academic essay, this will help to complete a spelling check and a grammar check. Additionally, if the application requires a recommendation, we recommend maybe a supervisor, a CUNY SPS faculty or staff member, a mentor that you may have had to provide the recommendation. Though recommendations from family and friends are a nice thought and they're great to read, unfortunately, they're not the best for these kinds of applications. Lastly, be sure to give your recommender enough time to complete the recommendation. There are various questions that the recommender needs to answer, so the night before is requesting a recommender the night before the application deadline is not the best practice. We hope you found these tips helpful. And I think I saw that there was a hand raised and maybe a couple of more questions before we go to the next section of the presentation.
Yeah, Teresa, I was just going to ask, we saw a question in the Q&A about the textbook grant and whether it might cover platform vouchers. So if a professor is using, instead of a textbook, an online platform that requires, payment to access for homework or quizzes, something like that.
Okay, if I'm understanding correctly, so I'll answer this two ways. As long as within the CUNY SPS online bookstore, as long as we see that it's a required material, the voucher can cover it up to $200. Now, in the instance where maybe the professor requires, let's say, for example, a lab that cannot be purchased through the online bookstore, we are able to cover that as long as the award does not exceed $200. The way that's done is that we would need you to submit your syllabus or syllabi, depending on how many labs you have, to us via email, as well as the link within the syllabus or as a separate email, or within the email, the link to that lab website, because we need to verify the price. Once we have that information, and if you're approved by the review committee, we can submit that to our business office, and that could be sent to you via electronic transfer or as a check as well. I hope that answered the question. I think those were all of the scholarships questions. I'm just checking the Q&A before I hand it over to Leah. Is the Career Ladder Scholarship open for 2022? So as of right now, we do not have funding confirmation on whether or not we will have the Career Ladder Scholarship. If that is available, again, we highly recommend for you to check your CUNY SPS webpage, your email address. But for now, what we have confirmed is our annual scholarships will be opening. Again, that has different requirements and different eligibility. So please be sure to check the SPS webpage to see what you will qualify for. I forgot to note that when you do submit what we call our annual scholarship webpage or our annual scholarship application, it's one application for all of the scholarship opportunities. with our next gen system, it'll automatically, based on your answers, match you to the opportunities that you qualify for. So please don't think when you see the website that you have to apply for every single opportunity. For our annual scholarships, there's one application. However, if you do see another application, please note that there is a separate application that you do need to submit for if you qualify for it, as well as while you're within the application, if there's any question that you answer and it does not deem you qualified, you will get a note from the system that says, thank you so much for attempting to, or for being interested in scholarships. Unfortunately, you do not meet the qualifications, but please continue to apply for other scholarship opportunities as they become available. Sorry. I can answer the scholarships and tax information at the end. So I will now hand it over to Leah for the next part of the presentation.
Sure, no problem. Thank you. And just to quickly answer Michelle, Teresa was referring to the Career Ladders Scholarship. And then I will mention, as Teresa did say, the application for our annual scholarships should be opening within the next couple of weeks. So definitely be sure to check your email. And this is a great group to share that for fall 2022, we will actually have some scholarships geared specifically towards first generation students. And seeing that you are here, keep on the lookout for that. Because it would be a great opportunity for you to apply for that scholarship. So that will be part of the annual scholarship application. When we open up the application for annual scholarships, you'll also have the opportunity to apply for that scholarship, and more information will be sent out over email. So I'm gonna go not too quick, but kind of quick, because we definitely have more questions in the Q&A. So we also have some benefits that are available to our veterans, active member military. We do have an office for military and veteran student services who can definitely help navigate if you think you qualify for tuition assistance under this category. They're very, they want to help you because there are benefits out there that folks may not be aware of. Some examples of benefits that are available are veteran tuition assistance that is actually available through the state for both undergraduate and graduate students. We also have post 9/11 benefits offered through Chapter 33, but there are other chapters that you can work with your counselor to see if you're eligible for any type of tuition assistance. There are benefits that are offered under the broad category of Department of Defense, which include the Air Force, that depending on your eligibility, you could get up to $250 per credit in tuition assistance. And that leads into our newly established, about a couple of semesters now, of our CUNY SPS US Military Bachelor's Degree Completion Scholarship. That scholarship is specifically targeted towards students who have Department of Defense funding, but it doesn't cover their entire tuition balance. Any students in these categories do so much for us in our country that we want to do something small to say thank you. And if eligible for this scholarship, it will cover the gap in tuition that the Department of Defense funding does not cover, as well as the student fees. And this scholarship will follow the student through graduation. And it's available to undergraduate students. Now, I'm not sure if some of you have seen the recent announcement by CUNY partnering with Amazon for employee-sponsored tuition benefits, but they are not the only company that are now offering their employees some assistance towards tuition. I saw McDonald's was actually offering, I believe, up to $3,000 a year to help their employees with the cost of college. So we wanted to let students know, because sometimes students are not aware that their employer may offer some type of tuition assistance. Now, in terms of tuition assistance from employers, there are two kinds that I just want to make you aware of. There's direct pay versus tuition reimbursement. Direct pay is when we work directly with your employer on billing them for the cost of tuition and fees. So the expectation is that you would submit to us what we call either a letter of credit or a voucher that would give us the information that we need to bill your employer directly. It's always advisable to speak to your employer about the program requirements. For example, some may require a certain grade in order for the school to get payment. Now, we understand that, especially during these times, it may take some offices, the human resources offices is usually where this is housed in, a little extra time to process these vouchers for you to give to us. So we definitely recommend that you reach out to the office of the bursar to just let us know, hey, my employer will pay for my tuition. They're going to pay you directly. I just need a little more time. And that way we can make a notation on your account so that you wouldn't get payment reminders when your bill is due. Now, the other type of tuition assistance that's usually offered by employers is tuition reimbursement. And this is where the employee is expected to pay the school. And then sometime either during the semester or after the semester, the employee would take a copy of their paid tuition bill and any other documents their employer require and get reimbursement. Now, the reason I bring this up is that sometimes students, for example, if they just finish the fall semester, would like to use that reimbursement to pay for the coming term, but it will take some time for them to get that reimbursement. Again, we just encourage you to reach out to us so that we could work with you on giving you a payment extension, because I totally get it. If I know that I have, for example, $2,000 coming to me, I don't necessarily want to lay out $2,000. I would love to just wait for that. So we're throwing it out there to just, communicate with us, and we can definitely work with you on a payment extension. So as we're wrapping up our presentation, we just want to give you some tips and advice. I'm going to switch the order. I'm going to talk about number 2 first, to check your school email. So I know we live in a time where we get emails from everywhere. You go to a coffee shop, you just sign up, and then suddenly you're getting 20 emails a day from that coffee shop. We understand you are getting a lot of emails, but we definitely still want to encourage you to make sure you check your school email. Our primary mode of communication is through email, and we send it to your SPS email address. So important deadlines, announcements, payment reminders to file your FAFSA, communication from the financial aid office that you might be missing information, likewise from the scholarship office, will go to your school email. So again, we totally understand you are getting lots of emails, but we definitely encourage you to get in your habit, even if the semester is over, to check your email at least once a day for any important notifications. The first bullet, always reach out to us if you need help. So now this is me having my bursar hat on. I hear from students about their experiences with other bursars' offices. We aim not to be that. we are here for you. Our goal is not to stop you from graduating. My happiest moments are when I can see students get their diploma or actually hand them their diploma. It makes it all worth it to me. So if you need a payment extension, that you have a payment due date, and it's just 2 weeks that you need, reach out to us. I know a lot of you are registering now, and some of you are looking at the payment due date and wondering, if I just wait 3 more weeks, I get a later payment due date. Don't do that. Reach out to us, because if you're saying, I really want to register for this class, I don't want to get closed out, but the first due date is July 14th, but I really cannot pay until August 11th, reach out to us. We have no problem giving you that payment extension. We just have to know that that's your intention, because on the flip side, if, for example, a student registers and just decides they forget or life happens and they're not able to drop their class, we don't want to hold you liable for a service that you're not getting. So definitely reach out, communicate to us. Likewise with financial aid, I will say definitely during the pandemic, although students don't always qualify for it, if there is a change in your income, you can definitely reach out to financial aid for something that's called professional judgment, where you can possibly get financial aid if there's a change in your income. But again, communicate to us. We're here to try to help you. I can't promise you that all the time we can, but I can promise you we're going to try our best to find you a solution, because we want you to be here. Again, our happiest moments are when you graduate and we see you with your diplomas. File your FAFSA. The one thing I hear is students will say, well, I didn't file my FAFSA because I didn't know I qualify. I know I don't qualify for aid. One thing I will say definitely for graduate students, student loans, especially federal student loans, are considered financial aid. So you definitely need a FAFSA on file to get any type of federal loans. Additionally, scholarships here at SPS do require a FAFSA on record. So a FAFSA doesn't cost you anything to file. They've simplified the process. I remember many, many years ago when I've had to file a FAFSA, they have definitely simplified the process. So it doesn't hurt, and you never know when you're going to need it. So definitely every year, file a FAFSA. And lastly, life throws you a lot of curveballs. It's taking you so much strength to be here. It's so admirable. And, don't give up. If it's a financial barrier that you're encountering, again, please, please, please reach out to us. We want you to graduate. Being here is the first step. Even if you have to take one class at a time, whatever it is that you need to do to get to the finish line, definitely reach out and don't give up. And with that, I'm done with my thing. And I see Dr. Alsop has her hand raised, so I'm going to pass it over to her.
Thanks, Leah. And that's actually such a really important point to end on, because I think one of the themes that's emerged from some of our previous events is the reluctance that some first generation students feel about reaching out to their professors. And so I think this emphasis on really communicating, not being afraid to reach out, knowing that the student services and offices here are really here to help all of you. I'm so glad that you ended by emphasizing that. So I just want to acknowledge that we are at 7. We're actually at 7:01. I think all of the panelists are happy to stay on until around 7:10, a few more minutes. So I think there's some questions that have not yet been answered. And I know one that I think you referred to, Teresa, was about tax information and scholarships, and whether scholarships require tax information.
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. So actually, Leah just answered that. So in regards to tax information, we don't actually ask for any tax information, but like Leah mentioned, we do require a FAFSA to be submitted along with your scholarship application.
Great. I'm just looking through the other Q&A questions here. I know that one, so I think there was a question. Yes, you do have to file. We had a couple questions about any aid that's available to students taking less than 12 credits. That has come up a couple of times.
Yes. Students who qualify for Pell are not required to take 12 credits. The award will be prorated based on the enrollment status, but they can still qualify. In addition to that, for New York State residents who qualify for TAP may be eligible for aid for part-time study. That is the sort of the part-time equivalent. Although there is limited funding from that, they may qualify it, and we do give out aid for part-time study awards. Again, if a student is taking at least 6 credits, they can apply for student loans, even if their income doesn't allow them to get Pell or TAP. They can apply for student loans as long as they're taking at least 6 credits.
There's a question that says, this might be a silly question, but all of this information is all this information applicable to all CUNYs or only for School of Professional Studies? This particular student is a Hunter student.
It's for the federal and state information is for all CUNY colleges. The scholarship information, of course, that's handled differently at every school. Every school has different funding for that, but for federal and state aid, the information is the same.
And
except, I would, of course, the college codes. You know, you're going to put in the when you file, you're going to put in the college code for your school.
Yeah, and I would just say something that I hear from my colleagues when we have cross CUNY meetings is they definitely reach out. It doesn't hurt to communicate your needs. You know, they are willing to help. Just sometimes it's hard because, again, what some of them contend with is that if a student's intention is not to attend classes, they don't want to make sure that the student is being kind of strapped with a bill that then they would have to be required to pay. So definitely, I would say communication is key. I know that a lot of the offices, I've heard some of my colleagues said if the student had just reached out, so definitely, I would say that you should always reach out if you're encountering some difficulties. I see another question. Nancy, sorry if you answered this. Can a graduate student apply first for FAFSA under 12 credits a semester?
Of course, yeah. I mean, basically, the only federal aid the student is going to qualify is an unsubsidized loan. But again, if they're taking at least 6 degree credits, they can apply for a student loan. Their loan is we could process that loan just as easily as one for 12 credits. Absolutely, as long as they have at least 6 degree credits.
Just scrolling through to see if we missed anything else. Did anyone else see any questions unanswered?
There's a few in the Q&A, I think, that are waiting.
Yeah, I see one here. I will pass it to Nancy. Is there a section this year on the FAFSA for unemployment, or will it be transferred from the IRS tool?
The unemployment, the part of unemployment that is taxable, yes, it transfers from the IRS tool. If it's reported, most people are, for this year, people have to report their unemployment on their tax return. So yes, it is transferring over. Data retrieval will take that information.
And Leah, I think you saw this last question about scholarships for rent or other expenses. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it and then it flashed away. So
read it. Are there scholarships that are available that a student could use to pay rent or bills, or are they for tuition only?
I will say it depends on the scholarship. most of the scholarships at CUNY that's offered through CUNY SPS are tuition specific, but there are a lot of external scholarships that do allow up to cost of attendance. Thinking in terms of our lingo, cost of attendance takes into account living expenses. So that would include rent. So definitely there are some scholarships that are available for that. I will also say, as a SPS student, if you find yourself in an emergency situation where your rent is overdue, sudden loss of income, you could definitely apply to the emergency grant that can be used to help pay for rent.
And there's a question in the chat about using professional judgment if our income has changed from last year drastically.
Okay. If it's changed drastically for 2022, you'd have to document what the 2022 income would be. It's a little bit early for doing that because we can't really calculate for the whole year at this point. But during the summer or closer to the start of school, you can document how the family is being supported. We will try to project out what the income will be through the end of the year, and that's what we'd use to do the recalculation.
And then I'm going to throw this question out to Teresa. I usually take 6 credits a semester. Are all scholarships for students with 12 credits or more only?
Thanks, Leah. So no, that is not 100% true. For students interested in scholarships, the majority of our annual scholarships require that the student is enrolled in only 6 credits. But that also depends on the scholarship opportunity. So please be sure to refer to the webpage. If you see that it just says a student must be enrolled part-time or full-time, or they can be enrolled in either one. Part-time can be, like Leah said, even just one course, three credits. So please don't think that you have to be enrolled in 12 credits or full-time to be eligible for scholarships.
Well, on that note, I think we have officially worked our way through these really excellent questions that everyone contributed. I want to just take a moment to thank, first of all our panelists, Leah and Teresa and Nancy, for being here, and to all of the students for attending. It was really wonderful. And your questions, I think, really helped enrich our discussion tonight. So thank you so much.
Can I just say that also if you have additional questions, you can write to the offices and for financial aid, the email address is financialaid@sps.cuny.edu. If you have any questions, you can submit them that way and they will be reviewed and answered by a counselor.
I think we also want to plug again our upcoming event that we hope to see you at on April 26th at 6 p.m. It's going to be on imposter syndrome, what it is and how to overcome it. And just to give you a little preview, for those of you who are not familiar with imposter syndrome, it really has to do with a psychological state where people are unable to internalize and accept their success or their achievements or their skills or their talents. And oftentimes they feel like a fraud, and that it's only a matter of time before people find out that they're not as smart as they think they should be, or they think others are. So it happens a lot in academic settings. And so we're going to be talking about, what it is and how people can tackle it. So if that's interesting to you, we look forward to seeing you there.
Okay, well, thanks again, everyone. I will advance the slide just to show our school logo. Thanks again for coming. We hope to see you on April 26th. We hope you all have a wonderful night. Thanks again for being here.